Hey everybody, welcome to Banfield. I'm Brian Entin, and tonight for Ashley, it is another tense night in Los Angeles as the LAPD face down protesters. There are Marines also apparently on the way. This is a live picture right now from our KTLA chopper over the scene. You can see the protesters are out there tonight. Nothing like what we saw over the weekend, though it is still early in Los Angeles. We're going to take you live there in a moment and keep an eye on exactly what is happening there for the next hour. Also in New York today, the Sean Diddy Combs trial entered its fifth week, with Diddy's most recent ex-girlfriend, identified only as Jane, alleging a horrific beating from Diddy almost exactly a year ago. So this is more recent. We're now talking a year ago. Many of these other women were talking about things from years and years ago. This is recent. She said he choked her and punched her, leaving welts on her head and then forcing her into a freak-off. Up until this point, Jane had never spoken of violence. It was the one difference between her and Cassie Ventura's nearly identical stories. They were so similar, you're going to hear it in a second. Jane also told the jury that reading Cassie's lawsuit was like reading her own sexual trauma. But she also said she kept doing freak-offs up until a month before Diddy's arrest. These were going on up until right before he was arrested. So will her testimony hurt him or will it help him? We're going to take you inside the courtroom. We're going to also unpack it with the prosecutor, actually the prosecutor who convicted R. Kelly. She's going to join us live here in a couple of minutes. Plus also tonight, the hunt for Travis Decker. This story bothers me. I thought about this all weekend. This is the father accused of killing his 3 young daughters. Well, it's entering a new phase today. The feds are now taking the lead on the manhunt. But could new information about Decker's Google searches mean that authorities are just hunting, not just in the wrong location, but also even in the wrong country? There is all sorts of new information on this manhunt tonight. It's very active. There's new photos that just came out. We're going to get into all of it, plus new details about what investigators found at the crime scene that we never knew before. That's coming up later this hour. Well, we begin, of course, with the breaking news tonight in Los Angeles. The city has now declared what they're calling a tactical alert. This came down just a little while ago. That means that all law enforcement officers must be in uniform tonight and ready to respond to the ongoing protests if needed. Again, live pictures right here. You can see the crowds. Protesters are assembling outside 2 key locations in downtown Los Angeles tonight. We've got the Los Angeles Federal Building and also the Metropolitan Detention Center. At 3 p.m. local time, that would be 6 Eastern, city and state officials ordered the groups to disperse, but the order was largely ignored. This comes a day after fiery protests erupted in the city as President Trump deployed the National Guard to halt protesters who oppose immigration raids in LA. And the situation escalated as the military engaged the protesters on the streets and worsened when at least 2 self-driving Waymo cars. Did you guys see this over the weekend? Crazy. These Waymo cars were vandalized and then they were set on fire. Waymo, by the way, today came forward and said, we are keeping our cars out of that area now after what happened yesterday. Several businesses were also looted, and building after building was covered in fresh graffiti. That's something we're seeing again today. There's a lot of graffiti on the streets of LA. According to LAPD, at least 50 people were arrested over the weekend. There were also LAPD officers were hurt, and there were 5 of the LAPD horses that we found out that were hurt over the weekend because they actually were shooting fireworks at the horses. The crowds had mostly dispersed earlier today, thankfully. 700 Marines were mobilized today by the federal government to join the National Guard, and we are told that they will protect federal agents and also protect federal buildings. According to the state, 300 National Guard troops are also in Los Angeles right now, and another 1,600 are on the outskirts awaiting orders, and 2,000 more may be on the way there right now. There has been a war of words between President Trump's officials and California lawmakers. California's Attorney General says the state plans to sue Trump. I actually just saw a copy of that lawsuit a little while ago, calling the federalization of the state's troops unnecessary, counterproductive, and most importantly, unlawful. Trump has suggested California's Governor Gavin Newsom should be arrested. We just heard from Tom Homan on Cuomo a little while ago, who said, wait a minute, that's not exactly what I meant. We didn't actually mean that we wanted Gavin Newsom to be arrested. It was sort of spun, but he did say that. I want to go live now to downtown Los Angeles. We've got News Nation national correspondent Alex Capriello standing by. He's been out with the protesters. Alex, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, hey, Brian. So we are several blocks away from the federal courthouse, which was essentially ground zero all day today, beginning at around 1:30 Pacific time. That's when that hearing was happening for that labor leader, the president of that 750,000 strong Labor Party that was arrested on Friday. So the LAPD have essentially pushed these protesters several blocks now. We're on the corner of First and Alameda. And if you can hear these LAPD officers shouting to the protesters, they're asking for them to move and get out of the way. Obviously, this is an ongoing situation, but you can see a perimeter has been completely built around them. Many of these police officers using less lethal methods. You can see that green sort of gun that they use to fire rubber bullets and flashbangs and the like. But again, a lot of people still holding their ground, waving Mexico flags, Argentinian flags. Of course, this all begins with the ICE raids that are happening all across Los Angeles. News Nation able to confirm several other raids occurred in this area as well. But it's a mix between demonstrators as well as press. But this has significantly whittled down to what we saw earlier today outside the federal courthouse, where it was several hundred, even into the thousands perhaps strong. Now it's only about several hundred, I would say about 200 to 300 protesters that remain. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that these LAPD officers have been able to sort of disperse the crowd as they push them from the federal courthouse outside of City Hall, down through Little Tokyo to where we currently are on First and Alameda Street. Again, a currently active situation, as you can see, Brian, continuing to push with these LAPD officers. Overall, I would say it's maintained majority peaceful. We have seen some action in terms of vandalism and street takeovers from sports cars that are doing donuts in the intersection. It really escalated at about, let's see here, 4:30-ish, 5:30-ish, when we saw actual flashbangs go out. We saw these less lethal rounds like pepper bullets and foam bullets that were actually utilized. The LAPD says that was only because these protesters escalated it first by throwing water bottles and rocks at them. But it's far from what we saw over the last 48 hours or so, when people were throwing scooters and massive boulders on top of these LAPD police units. But again, mostly peaceful, but you could still see very dramatic visuals here between these protesters and these police officers who are just trying to push them back further and further.
Yeah, I mean, you say mostly peaceful now, Alex, but I saw in your video earlier they were throwing water bottles at the police officers. We saw the terrible video over the weekend. Just real quick, are you seeing the National Guard anywhere, Alex? Because we're told that there's already thousands of National Guardsmen there. Have you seen them protecting any of the buildings or out on the street?
Yeah, Brian, particularly at the federal building. That's where the federal detention center is. That's where the federal courthouse is, where David Huerta had his detention hearing. And that's where we saw the majority of those National Guards members, as well as members of DHS and Customs and Border Protection. They had riot shields. They were fully masked up. They were forming a line, a skirmish line, just in case they were trying to penetrate into that federal building. But as of right now, now that we are far away from that federal building, all you can see right now is LAPD and maybe some sheriff's deputies. No National Guard here, no Marines, just local law enforcement trying to protect the streets, as the mayor and as these local leaders have been trying to say that they were willing and capable of doing. Brian?
Yeah, it certainly seems tamer than what we saw over the weekend, which is a good thing, Alex. We appreciate you being out there. Stay there for us. We're going to check back in with you later in the hour, and we'll get you right away if anything erupts, which we know can happen very, very quickly. So we'll get back to you, Alex. Okay, I want to move to New York, though. Today, the woman known only as Jane was back on the witness stand describing her stormy 3-year relationship with Sean Diddy Combs. And her allegations have closely echoed Cassie Ventura's, except this is different. She calls the freak-offs hotel nights. That was the way she referred to them, hotel nights. And there was no mention of violence in Jane's testimony until today. Today, she opened up about the violence. She described a, quote, very terrible day, one that she admits to starting. It was last June, she said, almost 1 year ago, after what she said was 3 years of forced sex with escorts for Diddy's amusement. She said Diddy came over for what she called a date night, and she confronted him about talking and taking another woman on a family vacation. And things got heated, she said. And when he bent down to tie his shoe, she pushed his head into a marble countertop. She described this in great detail. Pushed the head into the marble countertop, and then she says that she threw candles at him. And Diddy allegedly fought fire with fire. Shocking. She said he chased her into her bedroom, kicked down the door, then kicked down the bathroom door. So kicked down 2 doors to get to her. And then she said he kicked her and he put her into a chokehold. She said she ran outside. She hid outside for 2 hours because she was so scared. But she says that Diddy never left, and they fought again and again. She said punching each other until Diddy grabbed her by the hair and dragged her back inside. And then Jane said he invited an escort over and then forced her to take ecstasy so she'd be up for sex. So he beat her, forced her to take the ecstasy, then forced her to have sex with the escort. Today, she also testified that she was with Diddy the day CNN aired the surveillance video of him beating Cassie back in 2016. She said she consulted him on the apology video that he posted. Remember that selfie apology video where he said, "Oh no, I'm not a bad guy." And later, when she learned about Cassie's lawsuit, she said she fainted. She said it was, quote, like reading my own sexual trauma. Now, throughout her testimony, Jane has said that she felt pressured to keep having hotel nights. Remember, that's what she called the freak-offs, hotel nights with Diddy, and that each time she cut him off, he somehow lured her back. She testified that she continued to have hotel nights with Diddy right up until last August, a month before his arrest. A month before his arrest, he was still having the freak-offs, according to Jane. I want to bring in now News Nation senior national correspondent Laura Ingle. She was in court again today. This seemed like a very emotional day hearing from Jane. What was it like in the courtroom, Laura, as she shared her story, especially today because it got so violent?
It did get so violent. This is the first time that we had heard this from Jane. We had heard a lot about her relationship over the last few days of testimony, but this is when things took a turn. And we knew that this was coming because this was mentioned by prosecutors in opening statements that we were going to hear from Jane and about this one particular night. And it came today. This was really, really intense. And once she started talking about that night, you could feel everybody starting to pay even more attention. People are sitting up straight, really taking notes. Jurors paying extra close attention to listening to her. And I want you to imagine this really beautiful woman on the stand, and she talks very softly. And so as she's going through it, she's talking about it slow, and her voice kind of goes low, and you can feel her emotion coming through as she is talking about the tequila and the champagne and the hurt feelings. And then she confronts him over this family trip that he takes to Utah that she thinks is a family trip, but then she somehow gets the feeling that he has gone there with another woman. And then she confronts him, and that's when she says she takes his head and bashes it on this marble table. And I think everybody, and I was in the overflow room for this part, and this is where people can kind of murmur a little bit more, and people go, oh, like they're watching a movie because you're thinking, oh my gosh, now you've really kicked the hornet's nest. And then we hear the story unfold of how she's throwing glasses and candles at him, and then she runs for the master bedroom. He goes after her. He kicks down one door. He kicks down another door. He gets her in the inside of the walk-in closet, and he grabs her. He beats her. He pulls her up by the neck, and she's dangling her feet are just barely touching the floor. And she actually mentions the word. She said, I called him a pedophile. And all of us were like, what? You called him a pedophile? And she called him a pedophile because the woman that she thought that Combs was with on the family trip in Utah was apparently young, between over 18. The prosecutor made sure we're not talking about a real pedophile. She said she was over 18, right? She said yes, but under 21. She said she wasn't even old enough to buy herself a drink. And that was what really infuriated her, the very thought that he was cheating on her, because she thought, here I've given the last 3 years of my life to this man going through these hotel nights. I haven't been with my child as much as I've wanted to. I haven't been with my friends. I've been doing all of these things that make me feel cheap. And he's gone out with somebody else. So that's really where her resentment came out of her and how it escalated in this story, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, you put it perfectly. She kicked the hornet's nest. But it wasn't just her testimony today, Laura. There were dozens of text messages and even voice notes between her and Diddy, where you could hear Diddy's voice playing in court today. What stood out to you there?
You know, our team really honed in on a couple of different things, and there were a lot of text messages back and forth. And as we go through the testimony in this trial, you're hearing the witnesses being asked to read these text messages. So here we have Sean Combs pushed back again from the defense table. He's watching her and he's listening. He's listening to his own voice. And one of the text messages, they go back and forth, and Jane says, I don't want to do these hotel nights anymore. They make me feel cheap. I'm not a porn star. I'm not an animal. And then the responses coming back from Combs are very dismissive in nature, saying, you need to chill. You need to chill out. You need to take a deep breath. Those are some of the things that he wrote back. And then, of course, there was a phone call or a voice message that was recorded, and you could hear it. So he's recording her talking about the video, and he's like, you wanted to do these hotel nights, right? And she's like, wait, is he recording me? And she can hear him scribbling on a notepad. And she realizes in that phone call that he's recording her and that he's taking notes. So we heard, I mean, talk about going behind the curtain relationship. That's where we went. Tomorrow, we're going to get into the cross-examination of this witness on the stand, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, it was just awful to listen to. Laura, we appreciate the update. We appreciate you being in court today and letting us know what happened. After each day of raw emotional testimony, we are left to wonder, is any of it proving the charges Diddy actually faces? Because remember, a lot of this is just awful, but are they actually proving the federal charges here? Sex trafficking and racketeering, because that's what's going to matter at the end in terms of a conviction. I'm joined now by Maria Cruz Melendez, former federal prosecutor who handled multiple organized crime cases and secured the conviction of R. Kelly. Maria, welcome back to the show. We appreciate you being here. You heard Laura describing Jane's testimony. It lines up so closely with Cassie's. How important is that for prosecutors to sort of show the pattern here of the behavior?
I think it's extremely important, particularly where you're dealing with a situation where, although you have video and audio evidence, some of it boils down to he said, she said. You know, even if Combs is not taking the stand, there's this aspect of he said, she said. And so where you have multiple victims, including Mia and now Jane, talking about the violence, it provides not only corroboration of some of the information that Cassie testified to on the stand, but also it provides, as you just mentioned, this idea of this pattern that Combs engaged in order to coerce and otherwise threaten and force the victims into the conduct that he's been charged with.
And again, it's awful, Maria, but when we think about the specific charges, the sex trafficking, the racketeering, the enterprise part of this, do you think that the prosecution is making that point? Is that sinking in with the jury? Because sometimes I just wonder, are they getting hung up on all this emotional stuff?
Right. And I think that one of the things to remember, and you had mentioned earlier that this was the first we were hearing from Jane about violence, but the prosecution has to prove all the allegations they've made in their indictment. And some of the things that they've talked about in their indictment is not just physical coercion, but the effect of financial coercion. And so one of the important things that Jane testified to that the government is likely going to use on closing is the fact that he threatened more than once to cut her off in terms of her ability to pay rent and other financial means that he was giving to her. And so I think at the end of the day, it's sort of a chipping away process or, you know, the reverse, building a house of cards that the government is going to be able to use at the end of the day in order to argue that they've met their burden.
Yeah, and you talk about money. I thought this was so interesting, Maria, that Jane said that she was paid $450,000 for what she called reimbursement for the relationship. How important is that Is that sort of like the enterprise part of RICO? Is there a reason that prosecutors wanted her to hone in on that so much?
I mean, I think there are a couple of reasons to bring it up. One is that can be used by the prosecution, which is this pattern of Combs paying off victims so that they don't testify against him or reach out to law enforcement. And so this is a situation where he essentially said, I don't like loose ends, according to some of the testimony. And so let me pay you for whatever resentment you might have. So it's a way of guaranteeing that she wouldn't speak out to law enforcement, at least in his mind, according to the testimony. But I also think that defense counsel could use this information. They could argue that she was simply looking for a payday, and when she learned about the civil lawsuit that Cassie Ventura had filed, that she was looking to also make money as well. And so defense counsel can use that information as well.
Yeah, I could see how that could go either way. Maria Cruz Melendez, we appreciate you coming on tonight with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, still to come, of course, we are keeping a very close eye on Los Angeles. We're going to take you back live to the protests. If anything erupts, we're going to go there right away. But even as the National Guard takes to the streets of Los Angeles, 1,000 miles north, Guard troops in Washington state, they're dealing with a very different mission, hunting for one of their own. This guy named Travis Decker, a former Army Ranger. These are new pictures that have come out, highly trained, now accused of killing his 3 young daughters. It's an awful case. The question tonight, are the authorities looking in the wrong country? Is there new evidence that he is not even in the United States anymore? We've got the latest. That's coming up next. So it has been a solid week since 3 young sisters in Washington state were found murdered. And the manhunt for their father and accused killer is still coming up empty. This is such a sad story. Over the weekend, police in the town of Wenatchee released 3 new images of 32-year-old Travis Decker and reminded the public that Decker may be armed and should be considered dangerous. Look closely at these photos. They really wanted you to see the tattoos, and also he's wearing these Converse, sort of like high-top shoes. He also has a $20,000 price on his head now, so we can probably throw in desperate. There's the full photos. Decker's been on the run since picking up his daughters for a scheduled visit a week ago Friday and failing to return them that night. The bodies of 9-year-old Peyton, 8-year-old Evelyn, and 5-year-old Olivia were found last Monday near a remote campground. The details are awful. Their wrists were zip-tied, and plastic bags were over their heads, and the coroner is now confirming that those little girls were suffocated. The county sheriff says the feds will take the lead on the manhunt, and U.S. Marshals now say that days before the killings, Decker made a series of Google searches, including how does a person move to Canada, how to relocate to Canada, and he also searched Jobs Canada. But how he'd actually get there or anywhere else is not clear since his truck, which you see here, it's actually doubled as his home because he's been homeless apparently, was found abandoned near the little girl's remains. We're also learning that a blood sample taken at the scene belonged to an unidentified man, and another sample didn't come from a human. They also say Decker's dog was found at the scene and turned over to the local Humane Society. Joining me now is a man who has tracked down over 300 fugitives like Decker as a chief deputy in the U.S. Marshal Service, retired Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Matthew Fogg. Matthew, we appreciate you being with us. What's your gut tell you? First of all, this is just so terrible that this man is accused of killing his daughters. It just makes you sick. But what's your gut telling you in terms of where he is when you hear these messages about Canada, but then at the same time, his car was abandoned?
Well, what comes to my mind, to be honest with you, with this type of heinous crime that he created on his own daughters, I think the guy may have committed suicide. I mean, that's just the first thought in my mind. But when you're talking about where he would run, where he would go, I mean, they've done everything as far as looking, checking all of the last known locations, who his friends were, where he usually would go in those areas. All of that's being searched. They've done a grid. They've laid out everything, checked every aspect you could think of. But there may be still some things that they're not telling the public, because there was at times when we would do our investigations, some things we just couldn't tell the public because we were zoning in on certain areas. But from this perspective, I just say that this man, he's running. if he is running, if he hasn't stopped somewhere and hasn't taken his own life, which if you got those infrared cameras up high and they're saying they've got certain areas that they're looking at to see if at nighttime if bodies are moving around or whatever, you're not going to pick up anything if somebody's dead. But the reality of it is that from the Google searches and everything, I'm sure that they've notified Canadian authorities to make sure that they're on high alert for the borders, to make sure in those areas up there, if anybody's tried to cross the borders or whatever. But these are the things they're doing right now.
Yeah, you make a very good point. Perhaps it's set in to this father what he did to his little girls, and he may not even be alive right now. His body may just be somewhere out in that heavily wooded area. What do you make, Matthew, of the DNA samples found? How does that play into things? An unidentified man, the fact that he also left the dog behind?
Well, you said it. It's an unidentified man. So bottom line is if they can try to find out who that person is or what that would help them to maybe narrow in on their search. Reality is right now we don't know. Now, they may be homing in on that. They may have some information. Authorities may have some information on that and maybe don't want to tell nobody right now. So that's another thing. But the reality of it is that you're going to be searching out there. And the biggest thing, I think, is the dogs. And the sheriff that was just caught, this guy that was caught on this other fugitive that was on the run, the dogs played an important role in that. When you're out in those wilderness areas and you got an avid woodsman, somebody that may understand the terrain, you got to work well with the park rangers, all of those folks. Our people will marry up with those folks. All the people that know the area, make sure we've gridded it off very well. And the bottom line is just hoping that he'll make one mistake. He'll do something, he'll drop something. Now, that DNA is important. If they should have his DNA, I think. But the bottom line is if he does anything that say they can track it, drop something, anything. He's got to eat. Those things, when somebody's on the run, several things they got to be able to eat, they got to be able to drink water, and they got to have shelter somewhere. So those are the things you're going to be looking for.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You say, I think they probably have his DNA too, from the car, from something.
Right.
And the fact that they're saying unidentified male DNA also found there near the scene, that just makes me wonder, was there another person out there? Who knows? Just last thing, the fact that this guy was in the National Guard, knows how to live off the grid. I mean, for a lot of us to hear, oh my gosh, in the woods for a week, how would you survive? Right. I mean, this guy apparently knows how to do that. That's got to make the search more difficult.
Absolutely. I mean, but again, there's only so many places he can go. He can, he's stuck. He's out there, and if he is out there, and like I said, if he's alive, and like I said, my gut feeling is he's probably taking his life. But if he's alive and he's somewhere in time, he will make a mistake. He'll do something where they'll be able to home in on it, unless he had some assistance from somebody, and somebody's helped him to get out of the area. And that's a whole nother thing we're talking about here when we're saying some other DNA that they found. We don't know. The bottom line is, I believe, like I said, there are certain things the authorities are not going to tell us every detailed thing. They're not going to put that out on the media. But there may be some things that they're homing in on, and they're just trying to develop it further.
Yeah, hopefully they know more than they're letting on. I just think of the little girl's mom. I mean, what she must be going through right now. It's unimaginable. Matthew Fogg, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, before we go to a break and update, in another manhunt we've been following very, very closely, the girlfriend of Derek Groves, who is still on the run after breaking out of a New Orleans jail, that was back on May 16th, has been arrested. Another one they've arrested now, another one of these girlfriends, for aiding his escape. Police say 28-year-old Dariana Burton, there she is. I thought that was such a strange mugshot, by the way. She's like got the head kind of cocked. Supplied Groves with contraband while he was in jail, alleging the two had an affair while Burton was an employee of the sheriff's office. Wow. Burton now faces a felony charge. And there she is with, I don't know, maybe that's not the mugshot. Maybe that's from when she worked at the sheriff's office, because like she just looks a little too happy there, but she's now in trouble. All right, we'll be right back. We got an update with you about more cases coming up. Stay right there, because I've got the reason people in 3 New England states are not exactly resting easy tonight. A string of bodies, more than a dozen, turning up in Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island. It's very alarming, but what if all of those deaths had something in common? Would that mean a serial killer is out there adding up victims? Full details, I'll talk to a police forensics expert who may have some answers for us. We'll also take you back to Los Angeles after this. So if you made a list of things police hate more than anything, mysteries would actually be very close to the top. Cops seem to hate mysteries, and victims' families hate mysteries too. You can imagine why. So imagine how frustrated investigators are feeling in 3 New England states right now, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. They are looking at 13 unexplained deaths since the beginning of the year with no answers, no suspects, and for now, no reason to believe those deaths are connected. But if some of those deaths are linked, authorities may have a serial killer on their hands. I want to bring in Dr. Michelle Dupree, a former medical examiner and police detective who's also the author of several criminal investigation field guides. Dr. Dupree, it's always nice to see you. You know, a lot of people have been asking me about this one for, you know, it's got a lot of headlines because one of the bodies was found near Taylor Swift's house in Rhode Island. People are like, oh my gosh, New England serial killer. What do you think of it? I mean, is it possible they're connected?
Absolutely. You know, law enforcement does not like coincidences, and 13 bodies in a relatively small area, that's too much of a coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, I named the 3 states. I mean, it is a pretty small area. What does your gut tell you? I mean, from what we know so far, and some of them are just bones apparently, so it's hard to know much. But is there anything you're seeing that like commonalities between any of these bodies?
There is. Obviously, as you mentioned, the area. It is a relatively small area. That's a lot of bodies in a short period of time. It doesn't mean that they were all killed in that period of time, but they were found in that period of time, and many of them, or several of them, were relatively recent. The other thing is that most of them are females, and we do know that most serial killers are male, and most serial killers do target females. And so I think that right there is a very good reason to suspect that they may be connected. We also don't know the cause of death on many of these, and I believe that the police may be holding that back. Even if it is skeletonized, we can still tell a lot about the body and perhaps even how that person died. Again, we know that a lot of serial killers, especially those that target women, will use strangulation. That is hard to find any definitive evidence on the body.
Do they bring in the FBI at this point, Dr. Dupree? Because I was just looking at the map again, and you've got all these different states involved, different little police departments in that part of New England. Yeah, there's the map there. So you can see there's quite a few areas. How do they handle investigation like this when it's crosses over different states and police lines?
That does make it certainly more difficult because working across jurisdictions is it is common, but it requires a lot of coordination. It makes it a lot more complex. And yes, this would be a great case to call in the FBI, but of course that is up to the individual jurisdiction to do that, or to a task force if they have formed one.
What about the time of year right now, you know, in terms of things thawing out, and I hate to be sort of gruesome, but it seems like we see more bodies sort of become discovered around this time of year.
Yes, and you're absolutely right about that. Warmer weather may tend to bring bodies up that were in, say, a body of water or something. Additionally, this time of weather, a lot more people are outside. They're more likely to find things. People are out in the woods. They're hiking, they're camping, they're hunting. So finding a body is much more likely in this type of weather, in this climate.
I guess we'll wait and see if I mean, I hope no more pop up here, but it seems like there has been this sort of trend. Whether they're actually connected, we don't know at this point, but we'll certainly keep an eye on it. Dr. Dupree, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Dupree. Okay, still to come, we're watching and waiting to see what will happen in Los Angeles tonight. Remember, it's 3 hours earlier there from the East Coast, there are about 300 National Guardsmen in the downtown area tonight, guarding buildings, we're told. Another 1,600 standing by, awaiting orders. Will the protesters heed the disbursement order? And apparently, Alex, our reporter out there, was just saying there was one of these orders. Will the National Guard have to move into some of these areas? We're going to go live to downtown Los Angeles. That's coming up right after this. All right, so we continue to cover the breaking news in Los Angeles, the city there declaring a tactical alert. That actually means that all law enforcement officers must be in uniform and ready to respond tonight to the protests if needed. Protesters have assembled outside the Los Angeles Federal buildings and also the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown LA, and then they've been on the move also over the last hour or so. Authorities issued a disbursement order. That was at 3 p.m. local time, so that was quite a while ago. That order was largely ignored. There are hundreds of members of the California National Guard in the city tonight. There are also about 1,600 at the city limits just awaiting orders there in case anything erupts, in case they're needed. Today, President Trump mobilized 700 California-based Marines to join the National Guard. California Governor Newsom says he doesn't believe they will actually be deployed, but Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says they are on their way. Governor Newsom says Trump officials have notified him they plan to send an additional 2,000 National Guard members into Los Angeles. That would be nearly 4,000 guardsmen all told, altogether, if all of them actually end up in the city. I want to go right now to News Nation's Alex Capriello. He is live tonight in downtown LA. He's been out there with the protesters. It looks right now, Alex, behind you, I mean, from what I can see, almost like there's more police at this point than protesters.
Yeah, it's possible, although they are kind of tucked away. We're behind these police lines for our own safety. We saw some escalations happening with some firecrackers being thrown at these police officers. And so we took shelter behind this line of police that are sort of watching over this demonstration that's happening here in the intersection of Alameda and 2nd Street. It's not so much of a face-off as it was before, where you saw these protesters and these LAPD officers sort of going nose to nose at one another. Instead, it's almost as if they formed their own little powwow in the center of this intersection. You could see maybe some rallying, some flag waving, probably some pump-up speeches, but overall, a maintained peace at this moment, at least. You know, just a moment ago, Brian, I spoke to one LAPD sergeant, and we were able to talk a little bit about what this weekend was like from his perspective. And, you know, he came from a perspective of just pure exhaustion. It is a lot that these cops are dealing with, and they've been doing it since, you know, 2:30, 3:30 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, where they're just going head-to-head against these violent protesters, throwing scooters and rocks and commercial-grade fireworks at them. So, frankly, from his perspective, something like this, where they're just in the middle of 2nd and Alameda talking to each other, is okay with him and his officers. Most certainly, they are postured and ready to go if things were to escalate. And certainly we know nightfall is only about 10 minutes away, so we're going to see exactly what that brings. But as of right now, it's stable. And we're several blocks, as I mentioned in our last live shot, away from the federal courthouse and the Federal Detention Center, where a lot of the action has been happening over the last 48 hours. So from that perspective as well, Brian, this is a positive, what we're seeing right here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and you can always tell when you look at the police officers' faces, you see the shields are up right now. You can just kind of tell they're a little more relaxed than they have been when things really got out of hand. In terms of the dispersal order, have they actually come on the loudspeaker and said again that people need to leave? Are people just ignoring that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that this protest has thinned out quite significantly. At one point, it probably numbered 2,000, 3,000. I would say right now it's more like 200, 300. So people are hearing the dispersal order that's being played on the bullhorn. Let's turn this camera real quick, and I want to show you, if you see this white police unit, you see how it's got those horns on top of it. We'll do our best to show you. That's what they utilize when they need to speak directly to the protesters. That's where they give the dispersal orders. Also, if you take a look here in these boxes, that's where they keep the zip ties, and we've seen them and also other ammunition, less lethal ammunition, it looks like, if you see those blue pellets. So most certainly these police officers are preparing for the worst to happen. Right now it is relatively peaceful, relatively safe, but we've seen zip ties distributed. We've seen these less lethal measures get proactively dispersed. We see the bullhorn ready to go, and they've most certainly told these protesters to get out of here, to disperse, that this is no longer a lawful protest. But at the moment, it's not as if they are taking action to actually descend on these protesters. In fact, I think that's sort of what we've been hearing echoed from this Los Angeles mayor and the California governor, that don't buy into any sort of violence, don't escalate things, because we also want to protect your First Amendment rights. Brian?
Yeah, I noticed in your video, I saw them getting all the zip ties out. You wonder if they're going to give a final warning at some point that people have to leave, and then that's when they go in and use the zip ties. Alex, appreciate you very much. We'll get back to you if anything develops. Still to come, it took more than a week for authorities to track down and capture a fugitive in Tennessee named Ed. We're going to end on a lighter note here, and it took more than a squad car to bring him in. We've got the pictures in black and white. You can end on kind of a fun story before you go to bed. It's been a heavy day. It's been a heavy weekend. We'll focus on Ed right after this. So when we brought you this story last week, the culprit on the run did not even have a name. I'm talking about the pet zebra in central Tennessee that bolted just a day after arriving at his new home on the outskirts of Nashville. Look at him go. That zebra became an internet star faster than he ran down Interstate 24, shutting down traffic, weaving in and out of trees. He's now known as Ed the Zebra, and I am happy to report that after more than a week of eluding authorities, Ed is back home with his owners. So that's the good news tonight. Ashley is going to be back tomorrow night. Thanks for sticking around with us. Hope everybody has a good night. See you later.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.